Good evening, everyone. It being 6 o'clock on Tuesday, May 5th, 2020. We're going to begin the first in a series of budget hearings for the Committee of Ways and Means. All votes will be by roll call. So if you would like to speak, please use the raise hand function. Clerk Cimino, can we please have a roll call to begin the meeting?
Certainly. Councillor Barrica?
Here.
Councillor Connors?
Here.
Councillor Flaherty?
Here.
Councillor Ryan?
Here.
Councillor Sasha?
Here.
All present.
Thank you. Okay, there are no minutes to approve for this evening, and there is no old business. So before we get on to our new business, I just wanted to begin by thanking all of you who are joining us tonight, our town employees, members of the town council, and members of the public. Before we get started, I wanted to take a minute to acknowledge the unusual and unforeseen circumstances in which we find ourselves during this year's budget review. I know this format is not ideal, especially for those of us new to the council and to this process. So I want to thank you in advance for your patience as we work through the nights ahead. With many of us new and for members of the public who are in attendance, I would like to spend a minute reviewing the role of this committee and the council in the budget process. Each municipality in the Commonwealth has its own unique process around the budget. What applies in one community may not apply in another. In Braintree, by order of the town charter, the council shall adopt the budget with or without amendments. The council may amend the budget by deleting or decreasing programs, but the council has no authority to add programs or increase amounts allotted to any line item. Over the course of the next 3 weeks, this committee is charged with reviewing the town's budget, inquiring to understand the financial decisions made by each department, with the goal being a comprehensive understanding of the financial outlook and health of the town's operating budget. At the close of these reviews, the Ways and Means Committee will make a formal recommendation to the full council as to the adoption of the proposed budget. Members of the public will have the opportunity to ask questions and weigh in during the annual town meeting, which is currently scheduled for June 2nd, 2020. Residents who have questions about the FY21 budget should submit your questions in writing by email to the town council. We will route your questions to the proper department for a response. Finally, I want to say thank you again to all the department heads who I imagine had one of their most challenging years to produce a budget. We are all working with the best interests of the town's residents in mind, and we are looking forward to hearing from each of you. So thank you. And thank you for affording me those few minutes. And I want to now move on to our new business. And we will first lead off with FY 2021 revenue forecast presentation from the mayor's office.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I may, before I go into the presentation on the revenue forecast for fiscal year 21, I was hoping you would afford me the opportunity to provide this committee and any members of the public that are joining us this evening with an overview of how this budget came to be. The giant binder that hopefully you all have either received or printed off of the website since it was presented by Mayor Kokoris to the full council last week for referral. What I think many people don't realize is the budget process starts fairly early on in the year, and for us it started the second week of January 2020, shortly after Mayor Kokoris took office. And this year, under the direction of Finance Director Ed Spellman, who is here with us this evening, and myself serving as Mayor Kokoris' interim chief of staff throughout the process, put into place what I think was a fairly a new way of doing things. And that was intended so that all of our department heads could play an active role in collaborating with the mayor's office and determining that the final product that we have presented to you this evening is not only a fiscally responsible budgetary proposal for the town for fiscal year 21, but also one that allows us to continue to provide a high level of services to our residents while meeting our obligations to our staff. So Ed and I started in January by asking the department heads to review their fiscal year 20 budgets and create what we call a level service budget, and adding the 3% cost of living adjustments called for by the collective bargaining agreements, as well as any other fiscal obligations set out in those contracts. Once the department heads level funded and added their contractual increases, they were then asked to reduce that total by 1% for submission or for submission for consideration for inclusion in the FY21 budget. At the time, department heads were informed that there would be no new programs, services, or positions without approval from the mayor prior to their submission and finalization. Ed and I then took those proposals and we reviewed them in conjunction with our anticipated revenue streams at the time, which I can tell you that in early February, they looked quite different than the revenue projections that you have before you, given the significant impact that COVID-19 has had, not just on our operations and economy here in Massachusetts, but nationwide. Department heads were then asked to go back to the drawing board and cut an additional 3% from their budgets, which I would suggest is equally difficult for those departments that have smaller programs as it is for our larger departments that make up the town's entire operating budget. In order to do that in a way that folks could, I would suggest, feel invested and make sure, again, that their department needs were being met, we felt it was important to take the subject matter expertise that our department heads bring to the table, coupled with the financial expertise that Ed Spellman brings to the table, and work really closely together to review line by line the programs and the budgetary needs that each department has, which, as you'll hear over the course of the next few weeks, and as you've hopefully already seen in the materials we've provided, are fairly unique to the department and the services that they each provide. There were some difficult decisions that had to be made. You'll see discretionary spending items like attendance at conferences and out-of-state travel had to be reduced. Decisions were made to delay hiring when positions become vacant, which you'll hear about most significantly in the police and fire presentations. But we felt that it was important to make reductions where we could so that we were able to, again, maintain the high level of service while maintaining our obligations to our workforce and not having to eliminate or reduce any of our existing staffing levels. I would suggest overall the budget that's before you presents a year of needs and not a year of wants. There was very little wiggle room for us in putting this budget forward to you, particularly because of the strains caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. So you've seen it, and we'll talk about it this evening shortly. Significant reductions in anticipated revenue, most notably, I would suggest, in the hotel tax, in the restaurant tax, and in the interest income, all because these establishments are operating at a significantly reduced capacity, if operating at all. And for the interest income, we're anticipating a reduction in the interest rate that could potentially go as low as 0.5%, when what we were anticipating originally was upwards of a 2% interest rate. I know that that it is unique that we are using free cash this year to balance the budget. And I would suggest that the use of free cash is exclusively the result of the coronavirus pandemic. If you look at the numbers, you'll see that these anticipated revenue reductions in those three areas that I've just mentioned, coupled with what we hope will be level funding of state aid, if those had been projected in a traditional year, we would not have been required to utilize free cash. And so I just want to reiterate that we believe that that is a unique situation that is resulting from coronavirus, and that we continue to identify and make sure that we maintain eligibility for any and all state and federal reimbursements that are being offered and coming out in the various bills and FEMA opportunities that are being presented that change every day. And so we are keeping an eye on that, and we are looking for ways to make sure that we're able to supplement and reimburse for some of these expenses, so that hopefully what we believe are truly conservative estimates are perhaps the worst case scenario, and we find ourselves in a better financial position than what we've anticipated here. And with all of that, I just would again note that we believe that what we've presented in the form of the FY21 budget is a fiscally responsible and incredibly conservative projection for fiscal year 21. And I know that we've answered a significant number of questions already, but I am confident that through myself, Ed, and the various department heads will be able to continue to do that and ensure that you as a committee have the information you need in order to support the mayor's FY21 proposal. So thank you for allowing me the time to provide that background, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Nicole.
So now I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Hopefully it works. And like I said, if for some, what should pop up, and I think everybody should have it, are the FY21 budget graphs, which look like this for folks who don't. And I'd like to just provide, exactly, Councillor Ryan, thank you. I'd like to go through the presentation just briefly, and I will ask that if there are questions about the revenue, if we could hold them until the end just to make sure we get through all of the projections, and then hopefully we can provide whatever additional information you need. And also, again, just to confirm, there were a significant number of questions about revenue. Answers were provided. I think the last batch was maybe 1 or 2 hours ago through Clerk Cimino, so I'm sure that those have also been shared for everyone. But again, hopefully we can address any concerns that anybody has kind of at the end. All right. So, oh, interesting. Okay. Share. Oh, so can everybody see the budget graphs? Okay, beautiful. Thank you. So what you have on the first page is just a high-level overview of the FY21 budget and the various revenue sources that we've seen throughout the binder. So I'll just flag for you, the biggest percentage comes from property taxes. A more detailed breakdown of the approximately 98 million can be found in Appendix A of the binder that you have before you. For state aid, which includes both receipts and charges from the state, are set out in Appendix B, and we'll talk a little bit more about those later in the presentation. Then you have the local receipts, which are listed out in Appendix C to the tune of approximately 19 million. And then the other category, which makes up about 3%, which comes from other financing sources that, again, we can talk about in a little bit more detail. I just also would note that that does include the free cash allocation for this budget. The next page is a chart version of the information that you have in Appendix B, the first page, which is broken down, which is a breakdown, excuse me, of our FY21 projected state aid. This is a couple of categories I want to highlight. The Chapter 70 funds, which makes up the largest percentage at 74%, is money that is traditionally used for education purposes. The other one I'd like to highlight is the unrestricted general government aid, which sometimes you'll hear referred to as UGA. The majority of the unrestricted aid comes from lottery revenue, and so anticipating potentially a reduction in lottery sales, which includes Keno. I think that's probably the biggest one. People can't be out in establishments, so they can't play Keno, which will result in a loss. But an interesting kind of note about the unrestricted aid is that the larger unrestricted aid goes to lower property wealth municipalities. They get a larger percentage of this funding because of when it was created. It was intended to be an equalizer amongst communities. So there are questions about why, for example, Braintree might get less in unrestricted aid than other communities. It's because larger percentages of the funding go to lower property wealth municipalities, and then some of our other cities and towns don't get any unrestricted aid based on the property wealth in their respective communities. The public libraries funding that's referenced there at 49,000 comes from a grant that we received for the library. The exemptions for veterans, the blind, and surviving spouses is funding provided by the state to help cover tax exemptions that we give to certain members of our community, with the difference being covered by the overlay account, which is something we've talked about earlier this year. The state-owned land is related to pilot programs that the town is involved in. The veterans benefit is a 50% reimbursement of costs that we received from the state, and then charter tuition reimbursement is costs associated with students going to charter schools. The next page, which covers the offsets and assessments, I mean, in short, these are costs to the town that the state bills us for. For example, MBTA is for the town's use of the MBTA system here in town. And the retired teachers' health insurance is when a teacher goes from our system as employed into the pension system, the state charges us for costs associated with their health insurance. And if I could just take a step back, I misspoke earlier. The veterans reimbursement is actually 75%, not 50%. Then on the next page, this is the UGA that we talked about, so you can kind of get a sense for where it has been over the course of the years. Our high point was in 2002, where we saw roughly $7.5 million in local aid, to our low point in 2013, where we saw just under $4.5 million in aid. As you'll see, the funding has steadily increased over time and brings us currently to our estimated value of just over $6 million, which makes up 24% of the state funding as part of the FY21 operating budget. The next page are our local estimated receipts, where you're going to see the biggest reduction and most conservative projections is for the revenue streams for fiscal 21. This is detailed more specifically in Appendix C of the binder, and a couple of items that I'll just flag. We have the payments in lieu of taxes, the pilot programs, at just under $2.5 million. The town is currently has 12 pilot agreements, our largest one being Ballot. And what that does is for entities that are not required to pay property taxes due to some special status they have under the law, but are still receiving the benefits offered by the town in which they are hosted, for example, our public safety services. The town enters into an agreement with them whereby they pay some sum of money as compensation for those services. Then here's where you'll also see the reductions in meals tax, which was reduced by 25%, hotel tax, which was reduced by 50%, and the interest income, which was reduced by 75% overall as part of these projections. Then we get to the other, which is that 4% on the overall, which is made up of the overlay surplus, transfers from from the water and sewer and stormwater accounts, transfers from golf, and then one that I'll highlight specifically is the sale of town-owned land, budgeted at $1.3 million in revenue. This is funding that has been included in budgets in years past. What I would suggest is different about this year is under the direction of the town solicitor's office, a new appraisal was done. The last appraisal was approximately 5 years old. We felt it was important to get a more current valuation of the property to include with an RFP, which is already drafted and in nearly final form. And so given the current state of both of those documents and the up-to-date information, we're confident that that will go out to bid for purchase before the end of this fiscal year. Understanding that in this climate, the potential for interested buyers might be impacted, but I can say that we have received inquiries from multiple individuals with regards to that property, indicating an interest in purchase when that goes out to bid. The other item that you'll see is the free cash required at just over $2.3 million in order to cover the deficit in this year's budget, which again is due to the impacts of COVID-19 on the economy and our financial situation. So then you have, as our last page, the overall breakdown by department, so you can see what percentage each of the town departments makes up of the overall operating budget. At 51%, our largest program is the school department. You'll be hearing from Superintendent Hackett later on in the week. And then as we go through the list, you have our police and fire and public works, as well as the other departments, all of whom I feel it's worth reiterating, worked really hard to make sure that what was presented was a budget to support their operations from a need-based lens, in making sure that it was incredibly responsible as we enter a year of uncertainty that I don't think any of us could have anticipated when we started all of our terms in January. I won't go into detail about the individuals because obviously you'll be able to hear directly from those subject matter experts throughout the course of these hearings. But I do want to thank all of you for your time. I want to thank you for your thoughtful questions before this evening. And I would yield back to the chair if there are any questions. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you so much, Solicitor Taub. I'd like to open it up to the committee if there are any questions concerning the revenue overview. Councillor Connors? Oh, good.
I took care of it. So I know I asked a lot of questions about the revenues in the concerns I had, I think were echoed by Sean. When it comes to the town-owned land, of having that in the budget for 3 years and having to do free cash for 3 years. So, you know, there's a pretty good chance, even if we go out to RFP, if we get to that point, that we're still not going to sell that land, and that's another $1.3 million into free cash. So I have serious concerns about putting that in as a revenue. I also had concerns with the rental buildings, and I did ask that question about the rental buildings. So when you look at the past 5 or 6 years, we've been very negative on this as far as receiving cash based on what we've budgeted. So I guess my biggest question is, why didn't we lower, why for the 3rd year in a row? I know we did a reevaluation. I know we're going to send it out to RFPs. This economy's in total disarray at this point. I think everyone can agree with that. So why are we taking that type of risk this year by leaving these in the budget as revenue, when in reality we know there's a good chance that will never happen?
So I would respectfully disagree with the idea that the more likely outcome is that it will never sell. I appreciate
it never sell. I just said it might not. The chances of it selling in this economy, in this state where we are and where we're going over the next year is much less than if we were selling it in a good economy.
So I can reiterate what's different about this year. When it was included in the budget in past years, there was no kind of formal plan in place as there is now. Like I said, the appraisal was done at the beginning of this year and is being finalized. We got an update earlier this week on the document itself that the individual who conducted the appraisal is completing. We also have physically the RFP in place, ready to go, with a couple of questions that need to be answered. And I can tell you that I personally have fielded as early as, I think, Friday of last week, looking for a status on the RFP from an interested buyer. So I think that the issues or the impacts on the economy are hitting everybody a little bit differently. And so while certainly it is having a negative impact on a lot of items, I do think that there is interest out there in the property. And I can only tell you that as I sit here today, the documents are queued up, which I don't know that to be the case in the prior years. And the town will be doing everything in its authority to ensure the sale of this property in fiscal 21 to realize those revenues. As for the rental buildings, that does include anticipated funding from a host agreement for a billboard to be located at 290 Wood Road. So there's a little bit of history around the billboards, and there was a billboard application that was approved for 290 Wood Road that was presented to the Outdoor Advertising Board and appealed to the land court by a neighbor I'll say, seeking a billboard at 236, 240 Wood Road. And so the litigation obviously has held up receipt of any funds because it has stayed the construction and installation of the billboard at 90 Wood Road. We are, again, as I sit here, I can tell you, we had a trial in land court on the appeal filed by 236 of the decision on 290. And the parties were scheduled for a post-hearing, post-trial hearing for March, which got canceled or postponed because the courts have closed, right? And so we are anticipating, again, now in more concrete timeframes, the courts I think are scheduled to open July 1st, a determination from the court. And what we have with 290 is an agreement in principle that sets out the terms, and the agreement is set to be executed upon a decision from the Outdoor Advertising Board, which has been placed on hold because of the litigation and the appeals pending. So what I know now are these concrete steps that have been taken to move the town closer to realizing these revenue sources, which have been committed. There's not a signed agreement, like I said, but that is intentional because the agreement gets signed once all of the appropriate agencies have issued their approvals for the construction of the billboard. But that is where a large percentage of that building rental revenue is anticipated to come from.
So just to, I totally get what you're saying, but my concern, so I guess one of my biggest questions is, we know that there's a possibility that this definitely is not going to be part of it, or could not be part of the revenues. Why wouldn't we take it out of our budgets? And if we do sell it, that's great. Hey, we got some more cash coming into free cash. We can enter the journal, we can log it in at that point. But why would we take that risk with such a tight budget this year of putting it in as a viable revenue?
Again, you know, I'm confident, and I think Ed would agree sitting next to me, that we have taken all of the necessary steps to ensure that we realize the revenue this year, and that we're confident that we're going to do that.
And I totally, Nicole, I totally get what you're saying. I really do. My concern is that for the past 5 years, we have been at a minimum minus 35% on rental fees. We've ranged from minus 80, well, that's a skewed number because it's only 6 months, but 74% negative, 35% negative. We have not made our rental fees in the past 5 years. The Allen Street has been in the budget for 3 years, and for 3 years we've had to overcompensate with free balance. So I just kind of want to get a feel, like, there's no definitive, like, the revenues we can definitively say our sewer water's coming in, we're getting those revenues, we know they're coming in, we can base a budget off of it. Some of the stuff, yes, with the state and government in the hotel and motel and all those, you guys did a great job on lowering those. I mean, you guys did a really good job at lowering those. I was really impressed when I looked at it and I saw how much you lowered them and knowing what's going to happen. So you guys compensated for that here, but I don't think we're compensating for that here, and that's my concern.
I hear you, and you know what I can commit to doing is also just providing updates on both the appeal on the land court, and also the publication of the RFP, so that you can kind of see as these steps materialize, which again are steps that were not taken in prior years. So as somebody who was not necessarily actively involved in the budget process, with the exception of one program, I can tell you what I know to be different as I sit here, and that's because it was done under the direction of my office. And so what I can commit to do, well, I appreciate the concerns, and I think that they're valid questions, is just continue to keep you and the council informed as both of those items move forward, as we close out fiscal 20 and move into 21, and kind of the status on realizing those revenue sources.
And I'll let anybody, so I do have a couple more questions, but I don't want to hog the space. So I didn't know if anybody had any comments on these as well. Maybe we could get past this and then move along to another area.
Donna, I'm going to go make sure everyone has time to answer questions, and then we can get to the whatever the next topic is. So Councillor Sasha, let me unmute you. Oops.
Thank you. All right, I will limit my comments to the same topics then. Let me echo two things that Councillor Connor said. First is, I agree completely that having been through a lot of budget processes, it's rare to see so much effort put into limiting the expectations for revenue. Usually what you see is everybody thinks they're going to have all this revenue and no expenses. So I thought this was great. I also would echo her concerns about, you know, I'm probably on the fence about the rental income. The sale of Allen Street, I think, given the uncertainty in the market right now, plus the fact that we are already dipping into free cash by 2.3 million, if that doesn't happen, and I think there's at least a significant risk that it won't happen, that's a lot of money to be planning on day one to be taking out of free cash. And it's just a little concerning. And the only other thing that I would ask about is the motor vehicle excise tax on the revenue line. So I noticed that one did not decrease. When I looked back to 2008, 2009, after the last financial crisis, that actually decreased by quite a bit. It was 9%, I think, in 2009, then dropped another 4.3% in 2010. So I wonder if that one line might be a little bit, you know, needs another look. Thank you.
So we did talk about that this afternoon in providing the response to that question, Councillor Sasha, that you raised. And Ed and I went back and forth, and I think typically you would have seen a greater increase in the excise tax. And so as I'm sure you know, we collect excise tax on newly purchased vehicles and leased vehicles. And that is something that in reality is continuing to happen. I think that especially, you know, this is my opinion that I will share for a couple of reasons. People are not taking the train because they are not going in large crowds, right? They're not perhaps utilizing public transportation, and there's a potential they won't be for quite some time given the concerns of the continued spread and what we know about the transmission of coronavirus. We also know that car manufacturers, anytime you turn on the TV, are offering incredible incentives during this time to entice people to lease or purchase vehicles. As an aside, I will share that this is the business that my father is in. And much to my dismay, he continued to go to work because they were having some of the best months they have had in an incredibly long time. So while I think we can anticipate, and we have anticipated reductions based on businesses that we know for a fact to be operating at a reduced capacity, this is, I would suggest, one of those that very possibly and is likely to stay at a minimum level to where it was in prior years.
Okay, I'll just say one more thing. I'm not sure that I would probably agree with you in terms of the impact of the COVID-19 situation, but I don't think we've seen the full economic impact that this shutdown is going to have. And as people come off of unemployment, businesses don't pull through, you know, that's the kind of economic impact that we saw in 2008, 2009, foreclosures. And that's where I think there might be a downturn in this kind of economic activity. But you know what, I mean, I can't predict the future any better than you can. So if you've discussed it and you think that that's a fair estimate, I'm willing to agree.
Thank you.
Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to speak about the Allen Street property. I think my fellow councilors have made the points very clearly, and I would ask that the mayor's office keep us posted on the developments with the sale of the property and how it's going, and let us know sooner than later if there are any issues with that, because I agree, I have concerns with that too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Flaherty, did you have any questions on revenue? Solicitor Taub, I have a question on both the billboard revenue and the town-owned land. Same concerns as everyone else. So if those are for the full fiscal year 21, and let's say if the sale happens in February, should we be taking this value down depending on when those purchases happen, considering we haven't even started, our formal RFP hasn't gone out yet. The billboard issue is in land court. You know, what if we don't win the appeal at the land court? It feels like there's a lot of unknowns with these two line items, and I'm just wondering how you guys are accounting for the amortization over the course of the full fiscal year.
So that's a great question, Madam Chair. The billboard agreement calls for a upfront lump sum payment of $1 million. And so that is not something that gets, there are additional payments pursuant to the agreement that are broken out annually, but the host agreement calls for an upfront lump sum. So that will be received as soon as that billboard goes up. The payment is required to come into the town. On the sale of the land, you know, I should note too, there were some lessons learned, and I'm hesitant to get into a great amount of detail where we're still kind of in the draft form, but there are some changes that have been made to the RFP based on some issues that were identified the last time the property was up for sale. And so again, that would be, as long as the payment is made in fiscal year 21, then it would cover that piece of the line, regardless of whether it was received in August or whether it was received in May.
Okay.
for an example. Right?
And then do we foresee any concerns that if the land sale, you know, the RFP goes out, a P&S is done, what happens if, you know, whatever building is designed to go there does not make it through the planning board, the ZBA, or any of the other requisite steps?
So again, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Some, you know, operating on some lessons learned from the last time, there are some adjustments being made to how the land is being going to be bid out.
Okay. Councillor Connors?
Is everyone done with the,
Go ahead.
So I also asked about the water sewer, and you guys mostly answered my question. The question was, we're jumping the revenues from the water sewer up 9.41%. History from 2014 through 2020, your average is 4.8%. So we have literally doubled the revenue increase. And just to reiterate, just in case anybody didn't see my question, in 2014, it was our highest at 6.91%. And in 2020, we were down to 2.92%. So consistently has gone down. The revenue increase has gone down. I know that's a oxymoron, but that's what's happened. And in my question, I had asked, will this cause an increase to the residents of Braintree? And if so, how much would be applied? And you guys answered that yes, there will be an increase to the residents, which, again, with this upcoming year, it's going to be a hard sell to now jack up their water rates with everything in the economy that's going on. But how much of that 9.41%? And I guess my second part of that question is the operating budget for the water sewer department. Has that gone up equally, or is this something where we have so we've been running under budget or running over budget and we're trying to compensate for that now? Or is this a matter of obviously they've got to be somewhat balanced, but have we been underfunded and are just trying to make that up by this huge jump? Or because this jump seems to be like unprecedented. It's absolutely huge compared to what we've done in the past.
So I'm going to turn over to Ed to answer that question.
Thank you through the chair. On the water sewer budget, the main increases in it this year, there's a significant increase in the MWRA assessment. And the second component, we are this year going to be including in the rate increase, we're setting aside some funds for the Tri-Town Treatment Plant debt service. We're looking at a projected increase in the debt service when the plant comes online of somewhere between $1.5 and $2 million. And what we're doing in this year's budget is a $250,000 increase in a capital line that will set money aside to help accumulate the funds over time to reach that increase. The plan is over a 5-year period to increase rates a couple of percent for this purpose alone. And what that would do is allow us not to have a 25% rate increase when the plant comes online and we need to pay our first debt payment on Braintree's share of the new Tri-Town plant. So that's the reason for the majority of the increases in the water and sewer budget. There was also some increases in the staff, and I'll let Jim Arsenault speak specifically to those items. But
Yeah, I'll ask those questions when he comes in about the increases to the staff. And then does that also coincide with the increase from the budgeted transfers from the water sewer fund? Is that why that jumped so high compared to other years? Because we're collecting more?
there's a review done annually, and Public Works looked at the time and the excuse me, the allocation. And based on the actual allocation of certain positions, they increased the percent allocation that was charged to the water and sewer department. So you saw an increase there for water and sewer.
So I thank you for that answer. That answered a lot of my questions as to why we jumped so high. It is just really, in my eyes, bad timing. It is not the year to be doing this. But, okay. Nope, that answered all my questions on that one. Thank you.
Any other counselor have questions on the revenue component? Nicole, if nobody else has a question, I was hoping either you or Ed, and if we want to save this for the evening of the finance discussion, that would be fine as well. Reading through the report from our town auditor earlier today, understanding we have to use some free cash to close the gap this year with our budget. Can you guys talk about how what the long-term outlook is for free cash as we're not generating it to the same extent? My concern is we are beginning to draw down on the reserves that we have. And again, understanding this year is hopefully the exception, but nonetheless, we haven't seen the capital plan yet. And I understand we typically take some free cash to help fund the capital plan. We are not going to be generating the money we expect from local receipts. So maybe, and again, another night is fine. We have a lot of nights ahead of us. I would just like to understand what the general outlook is for free cash as we think about long-term planning for the town.
I think it might make sense. I don't know. Do you want to take it now? I think it might make sense to address that tomorrow evening,
Yep.
and perhaps we can put something together. I will say that as we're sitting here, I think the capital plan will be hitting all of your inboxes very shortly. And that was done, just as an aside, with again, a very conservative look at free cash and trying to minimize what was required out of free cash for the capital plan. But I think that if, Madam Chair, with your permission, we will address that question another evening.
Yep, I'm definitely comfortable with that. And I'm grateful we have the time to do it, so. Any other questions from the council on the revenue sources? Okay, seeing none. At this time, I'd like to move to 20038, Mayor FY 2021 operating budget, or take up any action relative thereto. And I believe we'll be beginning tonight with the town clerk's office. And just for reference, this is pages 23 to 25 in the budget books. Mr. Casey, would you like to give us an overview to begin?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. The town clerk is the official record keeper for the town of Braintree. Records processed by the office of the town clerk include, but are not limited to, vital statistics, birth certificates, planning board, zoning board decisions and appeals, dog registrations, licensing functions, and filing from various town boards and committees or commissions. Additionally, the town clerk serves as the chief election official, chief public access officer, and chairman of the licensing board. On a day-to-day basis, the town clerk is supported by a professional and knowledgeable staff led by the assistant town clerk, Debbie Starr, and our two principal clerks, Jane Diora and Eric Coca. As the chief election official for the town of Braintree, the town clerk is responsible for voter registration and overseeing elections. This upcoming fiscal year, 2 elections are scheduled. That is on September 1st and November 3rd. Each election day, the town clerk's office staff is supplemented with the 3-member board of registers and with over 100 dedicated and seasoned election workers who work a very long and arduous 15-hour workday to ensure voters are given the opportunity to exercise their right to vote. As of this date, the postponed special election has not been rescheduled. If it is rescheduled to a date beyond the current fiscal year, all remaining funds will be held in reserve for that purpose. The town clerk's office fiscal year 2020 budget, as it was stated by the chair person, is found in tab F, pages 23 and 25 of the budget book. The total town clerk's fiscal 2021 budget request found on page 25 is shown as $454,519,000, down just a little above $6,500, or 1.4% below fiscal year 2020. Across each of the sub-departments, all salary line items increases are a result of collective bargaining agreements recently approved. For each of the sub-departments, which we have 3, I will address the reductions I have recommended for 2021. If there are additional questions, we can take them at the end, and I'll address any other items that you may have within the budget. First, Department 16101, Administration, line item bylaw printing. It's item number 5382, the expense line item. This line item was reduced by $5,000, going from $20,000 to $15,000. My fiscal 2020 request included $18,000 in funding for the codification and printing of the planned zoning rewrite and $2,000 in funding for modifications for town ordinances. For fiscal 2021, I have budgeted $13,000 for the zoning rewrite. In Department 16104 elections, under the election sub-department, I have made 2 line item reductions: printing forms, expense item 5421, and election expenses item 5790. On the printing forms, this line item was reduced by $11,000, going from $18,000 to $7,000. This line expense fluctuates every other year. My fiscal 2020 request included funding for the printing of the September and November local election ballots. For fiscal 2021, there are no local elections. It's essentially, it's a state election, and the state pays for the printing of those ballots. That is the reason for those that reduction there. My election expenses, this item was reduced by $5,000 from $15,000 to $10,000. This line item is used for a wide range of election-related materials that have either aged, have been modified, or were newly adopted. An example is our check-in books at the precinct. Those were about 15 years old. They were falling apart. I reused those last year. In addition, before I purchased new ones, I had a discussion with all of my check-in and check-out clerks. The old form were portrait presentation for them, and they found turning the pages was very difficult. By changing the orientation to a portrait mode, they will be able to facilitate the checking of people much quicker. So these are some of the changes here. And then another one was my early voting ballot boxes. Those are the red, white, and blue boxes where if you come into early vote, that you deposit your envelope. Those were purchased with these funds there too. So it's something that I utilize to enhance the election or replace older equipment. In Department 161, registrations, line item census, this line item was reduced by 10,000, going from 20,000 to 10,000. My fiscal 2020 request included funding for the 2020 census, were kicked off on April 1st. The remaining reduction in this will be a challenge to meet and will require some creative thinking to stay within the recommended allocation. However, when we get a request that we need to be reducing our budgets, I think every department should have a challenge, a line item that they have to work very hard for to try to stay within. And I'm up to the challenge. I may fall flat on my face on it, but I'm going to make sure that I don't do that. Essentially, that's the presentation. If there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to help you out.
Thank you. Councillor Connors.
Hey, Jim, I just wanted to say thank you. You guys did a great job cutting your stuff down. I know I had some questions on the salaries, and I'm just going to say this to every department. I'm looking at numbers. There's no association with anybody or anything. I'm asking questions because I'm new to this budget process. And I guess I didn't realize until you just said it, or whoever just said it, that you guys are all under a collective bargaining agreement. That's
not everybody in my department.
not everybody.
Yeah, it's the two principal clerks and the assistant. I am appointed by you.
Okay, that's okay. Thank you for clarifying that. So,
Yep.
so I had a lot of questions about the grades and steps, but I'm going to save a lot of that for human resources. You guys were our first department that I went through because it's the first one tonight, obviously. And so I had a lot of questions, and then I found out as I keep going through the departments, I have the same questions over and over. So I'm going to ask human resources a lot on the salaries, but thank you guys for working it and cutting it down. I think you did a good job at it, and hopefully your census budget will stay within, right?
Well, thank you. Madam Chairman, if I may just throw in another comment.
Yes.
One of the things when you're looking at the different salary line items, there's something called a 53rd week. Every budget year we add, Ed Spellman adds 1 or 2 days to that 53rd. That money is allocated. So once we reach the 53rd week in every 4th year, there is the funding there to adjust for that. So some of the salaries you see really aren't reflective of what is really the compensation is. It couldn't be off a week's time or a couple of days. Okay. It's something that comes up every year, and it's something that is very difficult to sometimes to wrap your heads around, because it was always a problem with town meeting in the years before.
Thank you for that. Good info.
Councillor Ryan. Oh, sorry, Solicitor Todd.
Thank you. If I just could, just to clarify on the salaries, so they're actually budgeted based on a 52.2 week year, which is why if you look at the salary scale, the budgeted amounts are a little bit higher because they budget for that additional 0.2 as part of each year's operating budget to make sure that it covers for the duration of the fiscal. And obviously it might fluctuate 52.2, 52.4, depending on the days, but the overall salaried budgeted amount is based on the actual number of pay days in the fiscal year, as opposed to just a 52-week year.
Thank you. Councillor Ryan.
I have 2 points I'd like to make. My first question is to the mayor's office with the reduction for the town clerk coming in at 1.41 3%, does that meet the overall budget reductions you've asked every department to come in at? Are you guys satisfied with the 1.41%?
So the departments, thank you, Councillor Ryan, departments were asked initially to make a 1% reduction and then an additional 3% reduction. Because the town clerk's office works under the direction of the council, the same directive was not provided to Clerk Casey. And so while you see some fluctuation in the reductions made by the departments, and you will see a couple of increases, we were not involved in the creation of the clerk's office budget or the reductions that are presented this evening.
So you had asked departments to come in at 3% reduction.
It was 4% total. It was 1% initially and an additional 3%.
4. Okay. So I guess I'd just ask Jim Casey if you could take a look and see if you could reduce it any more down to 4%, and just if we could go through that exercise.
I could take a look at it, but, and I will define it real closely, but most of our expenses are mandated, especially with the election, which makes a major portion of my budget. And, but we'll look, I'll see what I can find. We'll work it out.
Through the chair. So I guess I'm just asking you to look, and so we know that we went through that exercise. Thank you. The other point I wanted to make was we were talking about salaries and budgeting for 52.2 weeks. And I would say to the mayor's office, or ask if they considered a vacancy rate for the town as a whole, where we know that 100% of the positions are not going to be funded for 100% of the time. And could you come up with some type of vacancy rate where you could know that you don't need 100% of the budget for 100% of the people?
Certainly. Where you'll see that I think most greatly, well, there are a couple of positions that I can highlight that have been, in essence, partially funded based on the idea that we know that a vacancy exists currently, but given the situation, we're going to hold off on filling it. There's a position that's partially funded in the planning department. There's a position that's partially funded in the building department. And then what you'll see in the police and fire budgets, you know, there are only, in the public safety departments, you can only truly rely on a guaranteed retirement when somebody is hitting the statutory maximum age. But there certainly are scenarios where we anticipate or expect that individuals are going to resign or retire in the next fiscal year. And so you'll see adjustments in how those are funded to only partially fund at the higher level and then adjust for a delayed higher date to fill the position. And then that partial funding is obviously at the entry level rate for those positions. So that has been accounted for in a variety of the department's budgets. And I can certainly make a note to ask that the department heads flag those specifically for you as they present their budgets.
Councillor Sasha?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I think you answered most of my questions, Mr. Casey. The only one I have is maybe actually for the mayor's office instead, but I'm curious why we're anticipating reprinting the bylaw at all at this point, because with the master plan process just starting, I can't imagine that we would be updating the bylaw and needing to reprint within the next 12 months.
So I don't have any plan to reprint any of the bylaws. I mean, there are certainly, there was as I understand it, the start of a transition from the town's bylaws to ordinances. And so I don't know if part of that funding would encompass those ordinances that are unrelated to zoning.
A small portion of the town clerk's budget, Madam Chairwoman, a portion of that budget does account for any new town ordinances that the council may pass. And what we do is we do the recodification of those, And then once a year, I will print a new section that are impacted by those changes, and they'll go into the supplemental ordinance zoning bylaws, or our bylaws or ordinances. Because a year ago, I was aware that the rewrite was coming down, that we have this in the application under general code, which hosts all of our ordinances and zoning bylaws. And with that, I was expecting that ordinance, that rewrite to be done last year, and I had budgeted accordingly to ensure that I could do the recodification so we could have it up online. Now, with the delay on it, again, I have no timetable on when it's going to be completed or not. I'm doing my due diligence to ensure that I have monies available. If it is passed, that my responsibility then would be to do the recodification of it. If I don't have it in the budget, I cannot do the recodification until I get funding for it. So if it's not done next year, it just goes back into the general fund. But it just, again, I'm hedging that it's going to be done. If it's not, it just goes back into the fund. So it's just a planning, administrative plan that I would perform on a task that I can see coming down the tracks. And when it reaches the station, I want to make sure that I have the ticket to make it happen.
Thank you for that vivid metaphor too, Clerk Casey. Any other members of the committee have questions on the town clerk's budget? All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Casey, and thank you for answering our questions in advance as well. I know that was a big help to me and many other members of the committee.
Okay, thank you kindly, and you all have a good night and a safe night.
Thank you. All right, next we will be moving on to Human Resources with Human Resources Director Karen Shanley, and this is in the book pages 19 through 22.
So I'm gonna turn you to Karen.
Thank you.
Karen, you're unmuted, so if you, just so that you know.
Good evening, Madam Chairperson, as well as the other Ways and Means members. First, I'll begin by giving a brief summary of the Human Resources Department. I think you probably all received it, but just as a review, we have 4 full-time employees: the Human Resources Director, the Benefits Coordinator, Human Resources Generalist, and the Veterans Agent also falls under Human Resources, and 1 part-time administrative assistant to the Veterans Agent. There are 4 programs within Human Resources. The first is administration. The second is employee benefits. The third, veterans benefits. And the last is celebrations, and that falls under the Veterans Department. And I can tell you that next to the school department, we have the next highest budget. And that is because all of the town's benefits are housed in Human Resources. So our department is responsible for hiring, resignations, retirements of all non-school and non-belled employees. We process all salary increases for steps, cost of living adjustments, and track employee accruals, usage, and balances. The director is part of the negotiating team for collective bargaining and handles step 2 and 3 of grievances, as well as investigations of any Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination, MCAD, complaints. We approve and deny all family medical leave, which is FMLA, Families First Coronavirus Response Act, and any other leave requests. Employee benefits for all town employees, including school and belled, are administered by Human Resources. The town is self-insured for its health insurance, workers' compensation, injured on duty, as well as unemployment. Department of Transportation drug and alcohol testing and non-DOT drug and alcohol testing are coordinated through our department. Employer Medicare, Social Security, and pension payments are also paid out of our department budget. The Veterans Division assists Town of Braintree veterans with Chapter 115 benefits, federal disability benefits, health benefits, food, housing, and other needs. The Veterans Division also runs the Memorial Day celebration, including placing a new flag on each grave site, Veterans Day, and Pearl Harbor Day events for the town. So I guess I'll ask if anybody has any questions just about our function first before I go into specific line items.
Any counselors have questions? Thank you for, Counselor Connors?
Sorry.
Nope.
So can you just, before you get into the detail of your line items, just, I know we've gone through this great salary thing and the collective bargaining. So we have a different setup that I haven't had to deal with. So could you just run through that? There was a good explanation from Nicole earlier about the 6 months, but so is a cost of living increase required per the collective bargaining agreement? So I'm trying to understand what the requirements are versus what is not required for raises.
Okay. So every year, each union, or I should say, every collective bargaining agreement, and they are typically for a 3-year period. One of the, I would say, the most sought after items for a union is to negotiate for its members cost of living adjustments. Typically, municipalities do not give merit increases to its employees. I mean, that's kind of part of a union, is that people get cost of living adjustments. So that is done, and it has been done in the past, the same parameters for each union. So there might be, the first year of the agreement, everybody has to take a 2%, and then maybe it's 5% that can be split between the next 2 years. This year, this past fiscal 20 through 22, everybody took a 2 in the first year, a 3 in the second year, and a 2 in the third year. So that is how all of those collective bargaining agreements were settled.
And so for the people that Jim had said, not everybody's under, can you tell me the differentiation between, I know like the fire has one, I know the police has one, but as far as the actual town hall workers, like the department heads, they're not under a collective bargaining agreement, correct?
No, they are not.
So where does that, I guess my question, where is that differential? Where does that line get drawn? Like, is it just...
So what has happened since I've been here, so I can't speak for before I came. So for 12 years, what we have done is the non-union people, the managers, have received the same percentage as the unions do.
That's what I was looking for. That,
Yeah.
okay, thank you. I was just trying to, I didn't see any rhyme or reason, and it was not making any sense to me how somebody was getting this and somebody else was getting that. And so we base it based on every time they step, every time they move, they get, even with the management, they get an increase based on the collective bargaining, what you've done for other unions. And then the same thing with cost of living. So every time union gets cost of living, so does the management. So basically they're not union, but they fall under, price-wise, under the same unions.
Yeah, so they get the same adjustment.
Adjustment, yes.
The other thing is that the cost of living adjustments, typically the town unions have five steps. So that adjustment, and I can explain, I think, just so that everybody understands, because I know people are new and it's totally different from a lot of private sector employees. When somebody starts, they have a 6-month probation. And after 6 months, they go to the next step. So everybody pretty much starts at A, unless they have some prior experience. It's very unusual for a union person to start at higher than an A step. After 6 months, if they successfully complete their probationary period, they go to the B step. Then a year from that 6 months, they go to the C step. And then every year after that till they reach the top step, which is now typically a 5-step. So it takes 4.5 years to reach the top step. Then the only type of increase anybody would ever get would be a cost of living adjustment. So that is kind of the theory behind the unions wanting a cost of living adjustment. Or it would be hard to retain employees that are now seasoned, experienced employees.
Right. No, thank you. That makes absolute sense. When we deal with our union, we deal with trades and foremen. So it's not grades and steps. It's he's a Leaderman 1 or a Leaderman 2. So it's just different languages, but okay, that makes sense. So the same steps get the same pay levels. So if they're all like a grade 1, step 2, their salary. So I assume there's a range there, like a bottom or a top range, or is it just one set salary for a grade 1, step 2?
All the same salary for a grade 1, step 2. Yeah.
So,
actually, we call them grade 1, A, B, C, D, E, because it's easier to sort of differentiate between steps and grades.
okay, yeah, they listed as like grade 1, step 2 in the salaries.
I know, I find it really confusing when I'm trying to look at those.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I'm probably dragging this out on everybody else, but I'm trying to learn because this is the salaries were the biggest issue for me in trying to figure it out. So I appreciate your patience. So like in the library, there's, and this is where I started getting really confused. So there's people in I'm just going to use this as an example, that are a grade 1, step B. Did I get that? There are 2 of them, and they both had the same starting salary, but they both got different raises.
Okay. Is this the librarians?
Yeah, so it's a junior assistant librarian. I'm sorry, it's on, I don't know if you guys have a book there. There's no page number on it.
Appendix I, is that what you're looking at, Donna?
I am looking at the salaries in the library, 610.
Okay.
There's no report, there's no, wait a minute, 610-61 is the page
Okay, I
number.
have it in front of me.
So if you go down and you see the 2 junior assistant libraries, they're both 1/2. They both start at 13,847, but one is getting a pay raise up to 15,300, and one is only getting a pay raise to 14,819.
Okay, and the reason is because people get their increases on their anniversary date. So the person who's making 15,000 probably started several months ahead of the other person. So when we're doing the budget, we're doing it by days and weeks to make sure that we get it just very precise, so that we're not over budgeting or under budgeting and having to look for a supplemental budget.
Okay, you can see where my confusion was. I'm looking at it and I said, I don't understand how you can go like this with the same pay grade and the same, but that makes sense. If one is earlier, they're gonna have a higher step by the end, right? That's the intention.
Exactly. What you'll see is when you reach the budgets, like the fire department budget, if you see everybody is at like an F1E, then they're all, if they've been here for a long time, they're all gonna have exactly the same amount of money budgeted.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the
You're welcome.
Thanks, Donna. I'm sure that was helpful. I know it was helpful for me, so I appreciate it. Does Director Shanley, did you want to continue, or did you have more to say?
I can go through the significant changes line by line in the budget, and I mean, I don't know what you would like explanations of. I mean, it's a couple pages. I'm happy to go through line by line.
I know that I sent a bunch of questions over to you, and I appreciate all of the responses I got. One of my primary questions was about the health insurance for the school department. So I feel, I mean, my questions have been satisfied and I appreciate the response and the quick turnaround. But I want to open it up to the other counselors. Councillor Sasha?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I think all of my specific questions to HR were answered, but I do have a question. I just have to ask it. Going back to the across the town employees for Braintree, the fact that the management salaries are not obligated contractually to get increases. Have there been any discussions townwide about not giving them the same raise as the contract for the other employees in that division?
I have not been involved in any discussions of that. Does anybody else want to take that? I'm going to flip it around to Solicitor Taub.
Thank you. What I can say is that there was some consideration given. However, because our non-union staff was informed that they would be receiving the same 232 as our unions, and the level of work and service that they have continued to provide, particularly during this emergency, the mayor determined that it was not appropriate at this time to ask them to take effectively a zero as part of the FY21 submission.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ryan?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would just agree with the town solicitor that I think the managers of the different departments that are not union employees are the ones that make sure that the departments are doing a great job through these difficult times. And I think it would be extremely unfair to ask them to take to not get the same raises as the employees. So I'm glad that we're not looking to do that. And I think if we need to cut money further, there's other areas to look at instead of taking the money out of the employees' pocket. So I would agree that we shouldn't be looking to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. Any other councillors have questions for Director Shanley before we move to the next section? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Director Shanley.
You're very welcome.
We are now going to move on to the library, which is pages 81 to 87, and we have Director Stano with us.
So if you could, Madam Chair, give us just a moment to reorganize. We have Director Stano and also Assistant Director Jada Maxwell with us, so I just want to get them set up with the computer.
Thank you. You're on mute.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Terry Stano. This is the Assistant Director, Jada Maxwell. It's nice to see you all this evening. So do you want me to?
Do you want to give a brief overview?
Yes.
I know you sent us all something, but I think it would be helpful just to recap.
Sure, sure. So I usually give a little introduction. So it says, thank you for giving me the opportunity tonight to present the library's FY21 budget. I welcome the opportunity to tell you about the library you have generously supported and funded. First, I'd like to thank the town for its generosity, and I'm personally grateful because I recognize our library's operating budget is far better off than many of the surrounding towns before and during this unprecedented health crisis. Many surrounding town budgets have been devastated by this unprecedented event. I'd like to thank the Board of the Library Trustees who would like to be with us tonight, but due to, they decided to opt out just due to the situation and keep everybody safe. But they send their regards and their thank yous. I'd like to thank the Board of Library Trustees, Nicole, Karen, Shanley, and Mayor Kokoris for the well thought out policies and guidance during this difficult time. Many towns did not lend the same support or leadership that we have been given, which has helped foster and guide a sense of responsibility and helped us manage our staff appropriately. So I receive a lot of emails as a library director about other towns, and I have to say, they're not weathering the storm as well. Now, I only have the information about libraries, but you get a good overview of what's happening in a town and what's happening with their libraries. It sort of gives a future forecast. So I just want to make sure that you understood the type of guidance that we received, which helps us manage our staff. The Thayer Public Library's operating budget meets all state aid requirements, which allows the library the opportunity to balance the focus from books to ebooks, streaming, and increased programming, which is very necessary at this time. The year's budget reflects the library's ability to identify areas that can be reduced to remain cost effective while striving to implement the needs identified in our 5-year plan. Last year, we focused on policies, investigating new ebooks databases, and streaming. This half of the year, we've concentrated on developing virtual programs and outreach for those quarantined at home due to the COVID. FY21 focus will continue to focus on researching, developing, and implementing virtual programs, reopening the library in phases, outreach for job seekers, health and wellness for residents, and making sure the library decreases the technology divide that many families and individuals are experiencing. The Thayer Public Library is about community. This is where our families and individuals are turning for lifelong learning, entertainment, connections, and during this health crisis, for information and compassion. The many programs the staff have developed over the past 6 weeks are too numerous to list. However, I'd like to share an email from a library patron that reflects the library's deep connection to the community. This is one email of many we have received. They say, hello, hope you are doing well. I appreciate all the virtual programs the library is providing, as well as the notification of electronic choices. I inadvertently deleted your email about the poll choice for the read out loud that you'll be starting. Would you mind resending the original email? Then it says, thank you. I cannot wait to walk into the Braintree Library when it reopens. It'll be so nice to see everybody. Take care and stay well. Braintree Library makes connections, transforms lives, and is essential. Residents are using the library more now than ever before, and we have stepped up to meet the community needs during this health crisis. On behalf of the library trustees and the staff of the library, I again want to thank the residents for its continued support, interest, and generosity. Also, I'd like to thank Mayor Kokoris and the Town Council for allowing the library to evolve and meet the future needs of the library. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was lovely and heartfelt. I want to open it up to any members of the committee for questions for Director Stano. Councillor Ryan?
Yeah, I just want to thank Terry Stano for being here tonight and for the job that she and her department does every day. The library is a treasure for the town of Braintree. It's such a wonderful resource that impacts so many lives in the town, and it's just, they do a great job there. And thank you for this very reasonable budget that is very well thought out. And I just want to say thank you for the job you do, Terry.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It means a lot. Thank you.
Councillor Connors?
Hi. So I just have a quick question, and this may be more for HR. I asked it in general. So you guys have a clothing allowance.
No,
On
so
your-
ASME. So the library has, excuse me. So the library has 3 unions. We have an ASME union, a BPMA, and a BLSA. So the ASME union has a clothing allowance. So I have 3 members in my ASME, and they get a clothing allowance. It's only the ASME unions. Yep, it's whatever they negotiate.
And I assume that goes if you, well, you do have the prescription eyeglass. So is that part of the union collective
So that's
bargaining?
BLSA, yep. So I believe each of the unions have negotiated a prescription glass one. So, so it's in each of we call our budget programs, lifelong learning, maintenance, community commons. So each of those has staff in it and line items from library materials. And so that's where the clothing allowance is, eyeglasses. So to be transparent, we break it up. So community commons is where most of the bulk of our staff is. And so they get the prescription glasses. Administration, where I have 2 unions, which is ASME and BPMA, they get an eyeglass. And then also 06, which is lifelong learning, I have 2 reference librarians, they get the eyeglass. So instead of putting it in a lump, we spread it up so that you can see who, which line items. It's more for transparency than anything else, instead of just having a lump sum.
Okay, and one more question. The photocopier rental, is that for internal use for you guys, or is that one that do you actually like make money? Not make money, but do you, like, I'm going back, I'm dating myself now. Back when you used to go to the library and you would ask for a photocopy and it would be a nickel to get the photocopy. Is that what the lease is for, or is it just strictly a lease for your internal use?
So the photocopy lease, we have nothing to do with it. That's all through Bell. They negotiate. I don't know if Ed's involved in that. They negotiate for the town. We tell them what we need. We have 2 for the public. We have 1 for ourselves. And so so the money that's in there was what is originally in there from when we first started leasing the copy machines, or the town did. So I take direction for them. So if they feel that that could be lowered, they would let me know and we would lower it. I'm assuming that that's how much it costs, and I keep that cost in there.
Yeah, no, I wasn't questioning the cost. So do you charge for the 2 copies that are used for the public, or do they get to use it free?
So children's, we have 3. 1 is for staff use only. Nothing is charged there. 1 is for children's, and that's more out of safety and convenience. We hardly ever charge, even though there's a 15-cent minimum. We use a key for the kids. We don't charge. It's maybe if an adult goes up there, we say, it's 15 cents. The lower level copier, we do charge, correct.
And I assume that goes into your revolving account.
It does. It goes into our revolving account.
That's what I needed.
It's not really it's not a big money maker.
No.
But what funds we collect, we do put it into our revolving.
And I just want to say, I have just been stepping up and using the electronic audio books. While I'm at work, I'm listening to books all day, and it's phenomenal. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Well, yeah.
I'm glad to hear that you have a library card. That's very important. Thank you.
Councillor Sasha?
Hi, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I just wanted to say, I think this is great overall. We're big supporters of the library, and we're members and everything. So I appreciate everything you do. The only question I had about the budget was there's a pretty dramatic increase in shift differential expense.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just curious what was driving that.
So going into FY21, they negotiated, instead of, they negotiated I believe it was a cost of, it was, what was it? Yeah, is it evenings? The evenings. So it's evenings, they negotiated a new way to calculate their shift differential.
Okay.
Yeah, because we're, the library, I have to say, we're not the same as other departments in the town where they may come in and work 8:30 to 4:30. The library is open 9 to 9, 9 to 9, Monday through Thursday, 9 to 5 on Friday and Saturday. And that's pretty much all year round, except this year, if you notice that we're not offering summer Saturdays due to the situation. So the library is open 64 hours a week. And so they all do a Saturday, they all do a couple nights a week, year round. So that's to compensate That's to compensate the work, the hours they're doing.
Okay. No, we appreciate the late
Mhm.
hours. That's the only time I can get my kids there, to be
Mhm.
honest with you. I was
Yeah,
just curious why it
absolutely.
was increasing, but so it's
Mhm.
part of the contract.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other members of the committee have questions for Director Stano? I'd just like to echo the sentiments. I think you can tell there is a lot of heart for the library, not only on this committee, but in town. And I am really grateful that for the mayor's office and for all of your hard work, Director Stano, that the only thing we had to cut was the summer Saturdays. So it's a little sad to see that go this year. I feel like it's impressive that we've been able to keep the amount of hours and services we have when I go to other OCLN libraries
Yeah.
and realize they aren't open on, a Tuesday.
Yeah.
Thank you. You guys have just done an unbelievable institution for the town.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, before we move on, I'm sorry, Councillor Ryan, did you have something? Before we move on, we do need to vote, I believe, Sue, on the revolving fund for the library. So that would be motion 20040, Mayor, FY 2021 budget, revolving accounts, or take up any action relative thereto. And library is R3, R4. Is there a motion for this order?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Clerk Cimino, Councillor Ryan, would you like to read the motion?
What is the number of the motion again?
200.
R3.
The number?
R3 on page 6.
R3 on page 6. I need a number, not
20.
R3.
20040.
Thank you. Motion, the mayor FY 2021 budget revolving accounts or take up any action related thereto. Revolving accounts will be presented on the date department heads present budget. And for this one, do you want a motion for all of them or just for the library, R3 and R4?
R3 now for 4, please.
So moved.
Do we need a
So
second?
I can read the whole thing too. So R3, that the library trustees be authorized to use a revolving fund in accordance with the provisions of Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53E.5, that may be spent by the library trustees without further appropriation during the fiscal year commencing July 1st, 2020 for the purchase of library books, audio, visual materials, and other library materials. The library trustees revolving fund is to be credited with all fines and fees collected during the fiscal year 2021 for lost overdue library materials. Library trustees may spend up to $45,000 in revolving fund monies during fiscal year 2021. So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please, Clerk Cimino?
Councilor Baraka,
Yes.
Councilor Connors,
Aye.
Councilor Flaherty,
Yes.
Councilor Ryan,
Yes.
Councilor Sasha.
Yes.
5 in favor.
Okay, do we need the motion for R4 right now
Yes,
too?
please.
Yes.
So motion that favorable recommendation to the full council order 20040 R4, that the library trustees be authorized to use a revolving fund in accordance with the provisions of Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53.5, that may be spent by the library trustees without further appropriation during the fiscal year commencing July 1st, 2020. Costs associated with the support and promotion of special programs, including salaries related thereto. The library trustees revolving fund is to be credited with all revenue from the rental of meeting rooms collected during fiscal year 2021. The library trustees may spend up to $5,000 in revolving fund monies during fiscal year 2021. So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please, Clerk Cimino?
Councilor Baraka,
Yes.
Councilor Connors,
Aye.
Councilor Flaherty,
Yes.
Councilor Ryan,
Yes.
Councilor Sasha.
Yes.
That's 5 in favor.
Thank you, Director Stano.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good luck with the rest.
Thank you.
We'll look forward to the library opening up again.
Great. Me too. Me too.
Okay. All right, moving on to the operating budget for town council, which is on pages 1 through 3 of your budget books. And we'll be hearing from Clerk of the Council, Susan Cimino.
Okay, so I was initially asked to reduce the budget by 1%. I was not given any further direction to reduce it any further. So that is what you see here. Would you like me to go line by line? Do you have any questions at this time?
I'll open it up. Councillor Connors.
So Sue, I just have a couple of questions. One is on the advertising. I know you guys kind of answered that question earlier about, you know, we have to put all the ads in. Historically, we haven't hit our number. So is the 17,802 just like a huge, is there a, I'm not going to call it a fudge factor, but is there a percentage of, how do we come up with that number?
Actually, when the change of government happened and council was created in 2008, that advertising fund was a lot higher than that. It's been kind of cut down through the years. At this point, it's just stayed at the 17.8. As you can see, it really varies year to year. We don't know what's going to come down from the mayor's office. What we're going to be requested to put in a legal notice in the Patriot Ledger. If it's a bonding notice, it needs to be the full motion, and that can be 2 pages long. It could be over $1,000 just for one ad. And it is by charter that we need to put these notices in the newspaper. So it's section 2-9C of the charter. And so it's really just stayed there because it varies so much and we don't know what's going to come down.
And my second question is on the reserve fund. Again, I think everybody asked this question because we all had well, the newbies didn't have any idea what that was. And we've never used the reserve fund. So that's something, if we're asked to go back and look at, we could go back and look at and potentially cut like 12K out of it or something just to bring it down to 10K. And or is that unrealistic?
It's definitely something we can look at. Absolutely, we can look at it. It's where we have cut. If we have to cut 1%, if we have to cut 3%, but it's there for any unexpected things that happen.
Yep, the slosh bucket.
Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would ask that the clerk of the council go back and look at reducing the budget back to 4%, like the other town departments. I feel that where the entire town was asked to cut down to 4%, we'll be reviewing these budgets, and we should be setting the example in concurring and walking the walk and cutting down to 4% as well. So I would ask the clerk of the council, I understand that you were only asked to go down 1%, but if we could come back with a revised budget to go down to 4%, and if you could make that recommendation, I think that would be great. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, no problem.
Councillor Sasha.
I just wanted to follow up on that. I agree that we should probably do that. And also, somebody else had asked a question earlier that went through the emails about the consultants. And I think that was the same answer, that it's in there, but we've never used it. If we needed to hire consultants for something, we could take money out of the reserve fund, right? So do we need that in there?
Yep, that makes sense. If that's something you want to do, if everyone agrees, we can definitely have that discussion.
Councillor Connors.
So I definitely thank you, Charlie, for jumping in there and asking her to do that, because I totally agree. We should at least be at 4%, if not more, just to show that we can cut back when we need to cut back, especially when we're approving it. So if we can do that, and I would just say for the outside consultant, we could definitely knock that down. But if we knock down the reserves far enough, we can leave the consultant line in there, and then we still have that line item in there in case we do need a consultant. At least we're not taking it out of the reserves. Let's not kill our zero going into the reserves. That's all. Thank you.
And Sue, I know we discussed it over the last couple days. We can, I believe if we eliminate $6,000 from the auditor, we agreed to pay the auditor $74,000. So that will take us down to a negative 2% over LY. And then it feels like there's some more room in there as well.
Agreed.
Okay. Any other counselors have questions for the clerk? Councillor Sasha?
Hi, sorry, I don't think we can do this, but I just wanted to throw it out there. We cannot cut our salary, can we? I mean, it's specified in the charter. So my guess is no, but.
So I can look into it further, but I believe if you wanted to make any changes to your stipend, you have to do it within the first 18 months of being elected. I think you, and it's interesting because I don't know if it says increase or decrease. They just say make a change to it, so we can look into that.
Councillor Connors?
So Sue, good point on that. So I guess that was a great one, Steve. So is it something that you could just take a pass for a year? Like say we're in times of need or whatever, and you just take a pass on the stipend versus changing your salary?
I would love to refer that to our town solicitor.
Yeah, may I make a suggestion that potentially we could bring that back another night? I think this committee may be in agreement, but we should make sure it's kosher, if I can say that. Any other counselors have questions for the clerk?
Yep.
All right. Thank you so much, Sue. Thank you for everything you do for all of us. I don't think we could run without, I know I couldn't run without you. So
You're welcome.
thank you so much.
You are definitely our rock.
Yeah. Well said. Okay, so after all these discussions, is there a motion to table order 20038, which is the budget review, the operating budget, to our next meeting, which is May 6th, 2020, tomorrow at 6 o'clock?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Clerk Cimino, a roll call vote, please.
Councilor Baraka,
Yes.
Councilor Connors,
Yes.
Councilor Flaherty,
Yes.
Councilor Ryan,
Yes.
Councilor Sasha.
Yes.
All in favor to table.
All right. Is there a motion to, I'm sorry, Sue, do I make a motion to adjourn?
Could we please table order 20039 to May 18th?
Thank you.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Sue, Clerk Cimino, a roll call vote, please.
Councilor Baraka,
Yes.
Councilor Connors,
Yes.
Councilor Flaherty,
Yes.
Councilor Ryan,
Aye.
Councilor Sasha.
Yes.
All in favor.
Okay, is there a motion to table order 20040 to our next Ways and Means Committee meeting on May 6, 2020?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Clerk Cimino, a roll call vote, please.
Council Berica,
Yes.
Council Connors,
Aye.
Council Flaherty,
Yes.
Council Ryan,
Yes.
Council Sasha,
Yes.
all in favor.
Now I believe, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Clerk Cimino, a roll call vote, please.
Council Berica,
Yes.
Council Connors,
Aye.
Council Flaherty,
Yes.
Council Ryan,
Aye.
Council Sasha,
Yes.
5 in
Good
favor.
night, everybody.
Thank you. See you
Night.
tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you.